Let me know. All right, awesome. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our first webinar of 2021 for Women in Leadership. During this webinar, and with the help of our wonderful panelists, we are going to cover how to be your own Soul Chief Officer. I'm Astrid, a Client Success Manager at Arron, a tech Mahindra company, and I will be your moderator for today. I am replacing our dear Debbie Menon, who can't be with us today. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please submit them in the chat room in the Q&A section, and we will try to respond to them if time allows it. All right, I will now introduce to you today's speakers. Our first panelist is Shelley Paxton. Shelley is a Chicago-based author, international speaker, and transformational coach, aka Liberator of Souls. After spending 26 years as a highly regarded marketing and advertising executive, stewarding some of the world's most iconic brands, including Harley Davidson, she walked away from the corporate world in 2016 to become Chief Soul Officer of her life and ultimately her own company. She launched Soulbbatical with the mission to liberate the souls of leaders and organizations by inspiring them to rebel for what matters most and rewrite the script of success. Her work has been featured in media outlets such as NBC, CBS, Thrive Global, Forums Inc., and PBS. And her first book, Soulbbatical, A Corporate Rebel's Guide to Finding Your Best Life, published by Simon & Schuster, was named #1 on Forbes' list of 21 books to read in 2021. On the back of her her book success, she launched the Rebel Souls podcast with an invitation to flip the middle finger to the status quo in life, business, and the world at large. Welcome, Shelley. It's great to have you. Our second panelist is Laurie Arron. Laurie is the founder of Arron Coaching LLC, a premier executive coaching firm in Dallas, Texas. In 2021, she was named one of the top 20 executive coaches in Dallas by Influence Digest. After spending 25 plus years at AT&T, she now serves passionately as an executive coach and trusted advisor to senior leaders, entrepreneurs, and high potential individuals. She helps her clients tap into their fullest expression as leaders, both for themselves and for the powerful impact that they want to have with others. Laurie earned her certification for executive coaching from Coaches Training Institute, the largest coaches training school in the world. She is also a member of 4PC, an invitation-only exclusive community for some of the world's most extraordinary coaches. In late 2020, Laurie became very inspired by the work of Chief Soul Officer Shelley Paxton at Soulbbatical, where their mission is to liberate 1 billion souls. Laurie currently serves as Soulbbatical's Chief Operating Officer. Welcome, Laurie. I cannot wait for the both of you to help liberate my soul. I'd also like to introduce our host, Sumit Grover. Sumit is responsible for the growth of Tech Mahindra's cable, media, and entertainment business in Americas. In addition, Sumit is also responsible for a few top strategic global accounts growth as a special charter for the company. After a successful stint for jumpstarting CME business in Japan, for which he was based in Tokyo, Sumit has relocated back to the US and currently lives with his family in New Jersey. And lastly, I know I've mentioned it briefly earlier, but I'd really like to give a quick shout out to Debbie Menon, who unfortunately cannot be with us today. She has been the brain behind those amazing webinars, as well as the recurring moderator. All righty, that's everyone. Sumit, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Astrid. And it wouldn't be fair if I did not introduce you properly. You've been the founding pillar of this webinar series, the season 1. You did a great job, and we're starting the season 2 with you as the interim moderator. Thank you so much for helping us keeping on track on this. Really, really appreciate it. Okay. Let's kick it off. Good day, everyone. I hope all of you are safe and healthy. I'm Sumit, your host. And in case you did not notice, in the name, the way it was spelled, the 5G, IT, and ER, please do look again. And please do call us for any of your 5G technology or engineering needs you may have. It gives me a great pleasure and a deep sense of honor to host such a special panel today on our show. I'm excited to have these eminent guests with us today and I can't wait to hear from them. Thank you, Shelley and Laurie, for joining us.
Happy to.
Friends, from initiatives like Nanhi Kali, empowering the girl child through education, to a flagship career development program where stars are identified called FAME, Female Achievers in Making, the inspiring women have always just been around the corner for us at Tech Mahindra. I'm particularly proud to share another accolade that we got awarded for being one of the top best workplaces for women by the Great Place to Work Institute. I feel privileged to welcome all of you to the first episode of our season 2, directed and produced by our most exciting business at Tech Mahindra, the cable media and entertainment business, where we offer experience, technology, and engineering solutions from glass to glass through innovative people, products, platforms, and of course, possibilities. I promise this was the last piece of any commercial advertisement in the event today. Well, talking of 2020, one of the blessings of the year was for us to launch the series Women in Tech, where we promoted and celebrated a single word: empowerment. From topics ranging from gratitude, survival of the fittest, career transitions, and to defining the meaning of I am woman in 2020, we had a chance to hear from some of the most phenomenal women in industry about how not only they transformed their lives, but also made a great impact both at home and at work. And now in 2021, we're back with the season, and we renamed from Women in Tech, the webinar series, to Women in Leadership. And now you'll know why. Conquering one's own soul, realizing what you want to do with your life, and fighting for what you truly believe. It sounds like, doesn't it sound like the plot of a Disney movie? I know it's easier said than done, but not necessarily. Today we have two amazing, strong, and inspirational women with us, Shelley Paxton and Laurie Arron, the protagonists of the movie-like plot I just described. They became the chief soul officer of their own lives and now are on a mission to liberate the souls of leaders and organizations by inspiring them to rebel for what matters the most and rewrite the script of success. You heard about 1 billion transformed lives, yeah? While I'm sure you all would love to hear the guidance and experience of our panelists, I must highlight and applaud Astrid, who's representing Debbie, who couldn't be here with us today. We miss you, Debbie. And also the youngest and newest member of the series, the shining light in the background, Ashmeet Singh. With that, let's begin the soul transforming journey. Here's to the women who forged a path, mentored others, and created a voice for those who didn't have a platform. Let's kick it off with none other than Astrid.
Thank you, Sumit. Always the best introductions. So our session today is about finding the tools to develop a fulfilling life. It's about the journey of creating what you really want in your life versus settling for what you think you should have. The new phrase these days is about leaning in. In this case, it's about leaning into your purpose or your soul in order to unleash your fullest potential and impact in the world. Today, we'll talk about how you can become the chief soul officer of your own life. I'm so glad we were joined by Shelley and Laurie today to talk about this important topic. And as a last reminder, Shelley's book, Soulbbatical, A Corporate Rebel's Guide to Finding Your Best Life, is available on Amazon worldwide. So go and buy it now. All right, here's to the unscripted conversation with Shelley and Laurie. Shelley, I'd love to talk about some of the truths in your book that I find like so powerful. Where did the title Chief Soul Officer come from, and what does it really mean?
Ooh, you're starting with a good one. All right, setting the context for this. So, well, we'll get into more deeply into the story, but here's the gist. So you guys all know I used to be Chief Marketing Officer of Harley Davidson. So I had this big title, and yet I was like, even though I achieved all the traditional measures of success, I was feeling empty on the inside. And so when I finally made the decision to really honor my soul and connect with it and listen deeply to understand my own truth, I realized that I needed a title that was going to remind me that I had a responsibility and an obligation to do that. So the title I gave myself one morning as I decided to leave Harley, which was a crazy decision by most people's standards. I gave myself the title Chief Soul Officer because it meant that I would be responsible for listening deeply, living my truth, and creating my life based on that.
That's great. Thank you. And yeah, I feel like we should kind of all follow that path too.
Well, that's the goal.
That's the goal. So rewriting the script of success, what does success mean today versus what it used to be in the past?
Well, yeah, and this is, I'm speaking the language that, Laurie and I believe in and we understand, and I hope that it inspires everybody who's watching and listening to us right now. So my belief based on my own journey is that our opportunity is to rewrite the script of success to be successful. So you heard me say this earlier, versus success empty. Well, what does that really mean? Well, it means that I know when I was, kind of at the top of the mountain in this really super sexy job in the C-suite, I was like, wait a second, why do I feel so empty when I've, ticked all of these boxes of quote unquote traditional success? And so what I'm rebelling for is the fact that success and fulfillment don't need to be mutually exclusive. That we can feel full if we're honoring our truth. And when we're kind of wearing that title, and by the way, I told you this earlier, Astrid, we can all wear the title of Chief Soul Officer. In addition to what all the other titles you carry in your life, give yourself the gift of this one, because it will help remind you that success really is on our own terms. And success starts from the inside out. And it also means we're caring for ourselves and really designing a life around our values and our boundaries and our well-being. That's what it means.
Yeah, and I think it's been so ingrained in us that we are defined by our job, and that's what defines us as successful. And it's so generational too that it's hard to like snap out of that and realize that we're more than what our job is. And so I like that.
And you know what? I'm Astrid, I'm glad you said that, because a big part of my story, and I know people identify with this, is that I realized I was living my dad's dream. I think so often we're conditioned by, our parents, our families, society, culture, religion, that we should be doing things a certain way. And so a big part of our message is, and maybe we'll get into this later, releasing the shackles of should. Should means you're doing it on someone else's terms. So we're all about doing it on our terms. And that doesn't mean leaving your job. This is for life and leadership, because they're one and the same.
Right. It's all about balancing.
Or alignment. I like to say it's about alignment, right? Because when you're clear on your values and your boundaries, then you align all the facets of your life around those things or toward those things.
I like that. I like that alignment term. So a question for Laurie now. You were a chief of staff to senior leaders at AT&T, and now you're full-time executive coach and trusted advisor to senior leaders. How did you apply this principle of rewriting your script of success to your life?
So it's a great question. And first of all, I have to say, when I read Soulbbatical and when I kind of met this work, it was like the language that I had been looking for my entire life. It literally stopped me. I was on a flight, stopped me dead in my tracks. And that's why I've gotten involved in the work. It's just so meaningful at a core level. For me, this principle is about success on my terms. As Shelley was saying, so many of the choices we make, or that I was making in my life, were to please others or meet others' expectations, or, meet the financial expectations of the family and whatnot. I knew deep in my soul that coaching is what sets my soul on fire. It's when I feel most alive. So look, I was chief of staffing at AT&T, a company that is near and dear to my heart, and I spent the vast majority of my adulthood there, thank you. And in that role as a chief of staff, I truly expressed myself as a chief through the lenses of a coach. I loved the coaching aspect of the job. And I got to work with leaders that helped celebrate that. So it felt very on purpose for me. It's how I saw the world. I knew that that's how I wanted to spend the rest of my life. And it took courage and confidence to sort of rewire my life and step out of the corporate environment and still serve and show up doing what I love. I like to say I bring the 3 C's to life: coaching, consulting, because I'm a problem solver at my core, and chiefing. I'm taking all of that with me, transcending and including what I was honored to deliver at AT&T. And I took the plunge. And frankly, I've never felt more alive. So I like to use that example because I'm sure we all have that in us. What is it that sets you on fire? And really paying attention to that and making it your own. You can rewire anything using, the principles that we're going to be talking about today.
Right. And I also find that when I'm really passionate about something, I'm most likely to be really successful at it too, because you're just so involved in it. And it's dear to who you are as well. So
it's turning the volume up internally and turning the volume down externally, and really paying attention to what's happening inside. And I just don't think that we do that often enough as humans. We are stewards of the business, or we're raising our children, and we all have big lives, but there is a passion inside of all of us, and paying attention to that is where it starts.
Yeah. Thank you, Laurie. So back to Shelley now. Your podcast, we talked about, I briefly mentioned your podcast, which was in your bio, but your podcast is called Rebel Souls, and super bold, right? So will you share with viewers what a rebel soul is? I want to be a rebel soul.
Yeah, you know what? It's exactly everything we've talked about so far, and I'm sure everything we're going to continue to talk about defines a rebel soul. So a rebel soul is somebody who is creating life on their terms. I mean, let me step back and say, here's how I define a rebel. I think this is really important context. I define a rebel differently than I think how we've always thought about it. Because some people will say, I don't identify as a rebel. And I'll challenge that, because the old archetype of a rebel is rebelling against. It's doing something on someone else's terms. It's totally exhausting and draining, and you're like fighting, versus how I define it, which is rebelling for, which is empowering, and you're doing it on your terms, and it's totally invigorating. So that's why we talk in terms of rebelling for who you are, which is your authenticity, what you want, which is the courage to create the life you want, to design your own dreams, and the impact you want to have in the world, which is your purpose. And so Rebel Souls was born out of that concept, the idea of what are you rebelling for? And we talk to movement makers and culture creators and game changers who are doing exactly that, rebelling for what they believe in, what matters most to them, and changing lives as a result in, across every aspect. People in business, people in the arts, people in not-for-profit. I was just interviewing somebody yesterday on rebelling for bravery. She's the CEO of a nonprofit organization called Today I'm Brave. And they work with youth and young adults to unlock their bravery in key areas, which I think is beautiful. And these are life skills that we all need. So that's maybe the long-winded way of explaining it, but it lights me up because I get to talk to the most amazing people who are rebelling for what they believe in and really, really making a difference in the world as we are.
Yeah, I love that you changed that definition and turn it into something positive, because you're right. Like, you talk about rebel and you feel like you're going to have to fight for what you want. In a way you do, because you want to make it successful, but it's just turned in such a positive light, and I love it, and it's really inspiring.
Thank you.
So Laurie, in the book, Shelley talks about releasing the shackles of should. We all grew up and fall victim of what we should do. Can you talk about this topic, and how do we escape it? And for that matter, should we really escape it?
No pun intended. First of all, I love this part of Shelley's book, the shackles of should, because those words were probably chosen very carefully, and that's exactly what they are. I step back and I think about it this way. We need to should pay attention to the language we use with ourselves. If you did pay attention to it, I wonder for all of you, how often would you use words like we should, we need to, we have to, we must, all of which rob us of our power, versus replacing it with words like I get to, I will, I choose, right? All of those just illuminate empowerment, and frankly, they propel us forward. So for me, the shackles of should are starting with what's the language I'm using with myself, and PS, how often does it come up that I use these words? So if you ask how to get out of it or release it, honestly, I wore a rubber band around my wrist after I read this chapter of Shelley's book. And every time during the day that I noticed I was saying I should or I have to, I would snap myself. That was just to get aware of it because it was more subconscious. And now I'm still on the journey, but I've made tremendous progress in the language I use with myself by replacing those shoulds, needs tos, have tos with the language. It's very, very empowering. And that's the beginning. I think the other one is when you step back and look even broader, asking yourself, how many places in my life am I doing things on someone else's terms or to meet someone else's expectations? And really be honest with yourself when you do that. There's not change. It's not a flash cut where you literally stop doing something the next day, but it's an awareness. And then it's like, what are the indicated actions I could take to shift that into things that I choose to do or that I want to do? And I guess lastly, I would say, Astrid, that it's not a difficult or complex step. I think we often bring complexity into our lives when we don't need to. Sit with the question, what if this were easy? What would this look like if it were easy? What's the easy path? And then take one step toward that. Just one step. Tiny steps done frequently equal the change you're going for. So that's where I'd begin. And I will also say lastly that I'm living proof of this. It's life-changing when you change the language you use with yourself. It really is.
Yeah, I love that, like one step at a time. I know when I started, in high school, it's like you have even at work, like you always like set this whole list of to-dos, right? And then you don't get to finish them, and then you're disappointed in yourself, you're hard on yourself, and you're like, oh, I should have done this or done that. But my dad always taught me, like one thing at a time, and don't like overdo it, because you're just going to end up not being able to finish or fulfill all of those things that you have to do.
Yeah.
So
I have to say this because this is another life-changing thing, and it kind of fits into the section here of shackles of should. I don't know who created this system. It's someone, and I should know this, but the 4 Ds. So when you're looking at that to-do list, and everybody on this call, I'm sure you have one, I ask myself the 4 Ds. Do I need to do it, defer it, dismiss it, or delegate it? And this is, again, what if it were easy? Like, this is all the Soulbbatical work in motion. Find the path that serves you most. And that little thing has helped me maximize my to-do list each day, honestly.
I'm going to look into this 4D thing because I need to make it my motto.
It all starts with, putting yourself first and releasing those shoulds.
Yeah. Thank you, Laurie. All right, back to Shelley. In your book and in the podcast, your mission is to liberate 1 billion souls. So there's over 7 billion people on this planet. So hopefully you're almost there. So that is quite a large undertaking, right? So how would you do this?
Well, here's the good news. I'm not going to do it alone. We're all going to do this together. And it's not just, Laurie and I are totally partnered in this effort to get more and more people to appoint themselves as chief soul officer of their lives, right? All of you who are watching and listening to us today, like, please, the more you implement the kind of things we're talking about, you're acting as your own chief soul officer. So we're going to do this together. Even from the beginning, when I wrote those words in the book, here's the thing I love. Laurie and I have a mutual friend, David Taylor Klaus, and he challenged me one day. He said, Shelley, you're an impact billionaire. And he wants to work with impact billionaires. And I was like, what is that? And he described an impact billionaire as somebody who's not focused on the money, because money will follow mission, but somebody who's really, truly focused on the impact of their mission. And like we said before, rebelling for the impact you want to have in the world. And so I look at it as, I want to be an impact billionaire. I'm not going to do it alone. So how do we get that momentum going? And we, through some of the talks that I've been giving, somebody said to me one day, oh my God, you've redefined ROI. It's now ripples of impact versus return on investment. And I wouldn't even say versus, I would say it's a both and. We, of course, in the business world, we're always going to want return on our investment. In our personal lives, we're going to want return on investment. And we want ripples of impact, meaning the more of us, I like to say, who are being soul models versus role models, who are showing that this is possible, who are showing up for ourselves and modeling this way of being, giving ourselves permission to do or to feel or to not do whatever is going to help us show up as our most authentic and powerful selves. We are the ripples that become the wave. And the more of us that do it, the bigger that wave gets. And the more of an impact we're going to collectively have. And so honestly, that's how I've thought about it from the beginning. And I love, like, when Laurie first came to me, and so many other people are coming and telling their own story of change and transformation as they've started to implement, you know, the simple principles of Soulbbatical, which are authenticity, courage, purpose, and all of those ladder up to fulfillment, because fulfillment is based on those other three pieces. And when we start to lead that way and live that way, we're going to shift culture inside companies and in the world at large. And that's what I get all fired up about, as you can probably tell.
It's good. It's so passionate, and it's true. I mean, we see it for everything. Like, as soon as groups of people that believe in the same thing kind of like work together, you see change. And we've seen it the past couple years, right? With a lot of movements that are going on, and it's kind of beautiful to see, you know, and like, it just gives you faith in humanity in general, that we can work together for the things that we believe in.
Yeah, and I think collectively we can work to rewrite the script of success. It's something you guys said in your intros, of we've repeated a couple of times, but this is, I really truly believe, and I don't think we have time to read it now, but I've written what I call the Rebel Leaders Manifesto, and it's on our website. It's on soulbbatical.com for free. You can download it. And it's a way of saying, like, starting to give us some ideas and some principles for how we can rewrite the script of success, which includes our own self-care and our own self-commitment, and getting that on the C-suite agenda. Because how beautiful is it if we start to model, as senior leaders, having values and boundaries and being committed to our own well-being so we can show up powerfully for others. This is the kind of thing we're talking about. And P.S., let's take time off, because in the US, we're not so good at that. So we advocate for time off as a prerequisite to smart work, creative work, innovative work, instead of time off as a payoff for hard work, which is kind of how it's treated right now. And it just seems backwards.
Yeah, and you see that difference in Europe too, that people are more efficient because that time off is not based on how hard you work. It's just a given, because that's the way it should be, right? Like,
because it's soul fuel. Yeah.
Exactly.
I want to jump in here and say, because Shelley and I were just talking the other day, we have this like little bucket of love notes for the people who have read the book and are really bringing these principles into their lives. Many, in fact, have taken the time to write us how this principle alone has changed their life has changed their work life by really putting themselves first. And as Shelley said, you know, taking time off because you deserve it. It's really, really touching when you read people's lives and stories on how, you know, these principles are changing. So make them, you know, as she's peppering some of these in as we go through this call, start to make them your own for our viewers. Start thinking about, what would this look like if I applied this to my life, or in one corner of my life? What would that look like? It's available for all of us.
And unfortunately, I think there's such a issue with guilt. Like, oh, I'm taking some time off, so is my team going to be okay? Am I being a burden by allowing myself to take some time for myself? I mean, it's just been so ingrained, and I think definitely more present in the US than it is in other countries.
You hit on something that is super important, and that is the guilt, right? Because it's just so, it's our go-to. I think many of us feel guilty if I'm taking this time off, because what are other people going to think? Or I might not get that promotion, or are they thinking that I'm really committed to this project? Fill in the blank. And I would say that's a mindset shift. You know, taking the time off and renewing and replenishing allows you to come back more powerful. And that's a great message and signal to give your organization about your leadership. So that's a paradigm shift, to step into that. I challenge everybody to step into that. It feels different, but it feels very liberating. And I think it draws in some respect, frankly. I really do.
Yeah,
100%. Can I give you our favorite bumper sticker line? Our favorite bumper sticker line from the book is, self-care isn't selfish.
Yes.
And we need more people saying that and believing that, because it's everything Laurie just said. And I think we, especially in the US, to the point you've made, Astrid, we've been raised to believe and have all this guilt around taking care of ourselves. But the reality is, if we're not serving ourselves, how can we serve others powerfully? Especially when we want to be these role models in our companies and in the world. So yeah, it feels like a good challenge for all of us.
I'll tell you, when Shelley knows this well because we talk every morning, but when I would say retired from AT&T recently, I call it rewirement, not retirement. I want to share with the group that I really took this self-care concept and made it my own. I created for myself what I call beautiful boundaries. This was the time in my life where I thought, I'm just going to do what everybody else seemed to be doing and I could just never prioritize. So for me, that meant putting myself first so that I can be the best to my husband, be the best to my children, my team, my clients, whatever it may be. And I created a morning routine, which many people have. I never did. I really enjoy coffee, and I wanted to drink coffee from a ceramic mug, right? Versus, you know, a paper cup rushing out the door with my briefcase. Like, that's my life. I wanted to bring in meditation and yoga and family time. I wanted to, you know, lose some of the weight, figuratively and literally, that I had put on, and make myself a priority with, you know, gratitude. And frankly, I also adopted a practice around saying no. I was very, very quick to say yes, whether it was an invitation or a meeting or someone needed me. I became so stretched that in my beautiful boundaries, I thought, well, I'm going to learn how to say graceful no's, no's that demonstrate my true commitment to others. But if something didn't work for me because my workload was too big, I found a way to say, you know, thank you so much, but that's not going to work in my schedule right now because I'm committed to this fill in the blank, Soulbbatical work today. But I'm super excited about your project. Let's talk in 2 months. You get the gist of it. Finding graceful no's, as our dear friend Helen Appleby says, is also life-changing. So, you know, everyone on the call probably has their definition of beautiful boundaries, but that's where self-care begins. You know, what is a beautiful boundary for you? What does it look like? Are you going to walk every day? Are you going to exercise every day? And not just say it, but do it. It's life-changing.
All right, it sure sounds like it. I feel like I need to work on that myself. And that's actually a great transition to this next question. What does radical self-care mean? Like, and Shelley, if you want to answer that first, and then Laurie, you can jump in, or vice versa. It's really up to you, but love to hear more about that.
Well, I think it's all of what we're talking about. Honestly,
Right.
I really, I can add a few things to it, but just know when Laurie and I talk about self-care, we're talking about radical self-care. And actually, we often elevate it to radical self-commitment. Because I think self-care gets put in this box of like, I'm gonna go to the spa and I'm gonna meditate for 10 minutes and all that. All of those things are amazing. Radical self-commitment is when we start to get to those beautiful boundaries and saying no gracefully and all of that, like saying yes to me and my priorities and what matters most versus pleasing others and serving others' agendas and finding a way to kind of live harmoniously in that space. That's really important. And then yes to sleep and hydration and movement and exercise and all of the things that we know to be self-care, but it's bigger than that. So that's what, so I guess a message for me is think about radical self-commitment, your values. What does it look like to live into your values? What are, as Laurie so beautifully said, what are your beautiful boundaries, right? What does your morning routine look like so you set the tone for your day? What does it look like for you to model this to your leadership team, to your company, to your employees? So all of those things I would say, and I will add, so Laurie talked about the 4 Ds earlier, and recently I've been talking about the 3 Ps, and I think they apply in this space, right? One is prioritize. Prioritize yourself. Especially as women, we have a hard time doing that. Prioritize yourself by giving yourself permission, right? I give myself permission to say no to that thing that doesn't light me on fire or doesn't serve my agenda, as an example. And I give myself permission to say, no, you know what? I can't do that today because it's draining me and I need my energy for something else. And then the last one is practice. So we're prioritizing ourselves, we're giving ourselves permission for what we need, and we are practicing this on a daily basis. And as Laurie said, it's like some of those tiny habits that we can put in place that can lead to some of the most radical change. So yeah, play around
Shelley,
with that. And 4, play around with that.
Well, and I was just going to say, in the spirit of being playful, because this isn't serious stuff, right? This is really fun and to play with and bring these principles into your life. There's a part of your book that I absolutely loved when I was sitting in 24E. It was about creating meetings. Okay, so I used to schedule on my calendar. I would literally block out an hour. Do not schedule, block, block, block. All of those sort of felt negative and draining and heavy. And it was like, I don't want to relate to my calendar that way. So now I still have those blocks, but they're called meetings. And I love that terminology, Shelley. So kudos to you. My assistant was in my calendar the other day and she was looking at all these meetings. She said, what are those? And I said, they are hours we cannot book anything because they are for me. They're where I create. They're where I work to serve my clients, to inspire, to stay on the path you and I are on, Shelley. And that is so important to me that there is nothing that will interrupt it. And so I just invite the viewers to play with meetings because it's fun and you can.
Yeah, I've actually noticed, and something as simple as that, right, that we tend to forget is lunchtime. Like we tend to just have lunch in front of our computers, continue working. And I've noticed a couple of my colleagues take time for their lunch, and I so respect that. And I always make sure to not book any time around that, to not interrupt it, because it's just this little 30 minutes, right, or 1 hour, however time you need. It's just so important to just kind of recuperate and take that time to just take the time to first feed yourself, right? And then second of all, to just kind of refill your energy, I would think, and just take care of side things that you might not have the time to do while working.
And
so just sorry, go ahead.
Pardon me, Astrid. Give yourself permission to take on these steps in a small way, bite size. I think many of us are wired, I know I was, to say, well, it's black or white. It's all or nothing. On Tuesday, I'm going to start doing this and stop doing that. And that's kind of heavy. What if another way to approach something is, hey, I'm going to do this for the next 2 weeks and just see what shifts in me. Or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm going to do fill in the blank. I think the point is to give yourself permission to try some of these principles on at your own pace versus, you know, failing at some massive commitment and then whipping yourself with it at the end of the month because you failed. Like I think you get the picture, but it's a lot of mindset work.
I think that's the issue with New Year's resolutions, right? You're like,
totally.
starting January 1st, I'm going to start running every day, and then you last a week.
I mean, it's embedded in the word resolution. What if it was New Year's invitations or New Year's shifts or just something that you want to lean into versus something you can punish yourself with if you don't do it? Anyway,
yeah, I'm an advocate that every badass accomplishment is a series of tiny steps, and we need to celebrate those tiny steps. Too often we look at that big milestone moment, that huge thing that happened, and it's like no one and nothing is an overnight success. We all know this, right? And so how can we apply that? Like, go easy on ourselves, be more gracious and graceful with ourselves to say, yeah, you know what? Let's celebrate those tiny steps, those tiny changes, those tiny acts of courage every single day. So give yourself that grace as well. I know we're trying to. Laurie and I try to keep each other honest on that every day.
That's awesome. All right, so I want to pivot a little bit and talk about some of the pillars and focuses in the book. Laurie, so fulfillment, authenticity, and courage. For fulfillment, how would you, Laurie, recommend we examine our lives to see if we are fulfilled? Like, how do we examine that?
I mean, so it's such a good question, and there's so many pillars in the book. I would never be able to do it justice in just a few minutes here, and if I'm thinking about fulfillment, it starts with, you know, how am I really defining success? Is it on my terms or is it on somebody else's terms? And if I'm truly honest with myself and I really dig deep, what shows up? So I'd probably start by asking myself a question on a scale from 1 to 10, you know, what would a 10 look like for me in the realm of fulfillment and what makes me feel alive and purposeful and meaningful? What does it look like? Who's in my life? Where am I living? What kind of work am I doing? How am I spending my time? And then also, what does it feel like? Does it feel uplifting or does it feel draining, like a slog? Again, being very honest with yourself. I would also look at the corners of my life, be it, you know, community or work or family, whatever, friendships and relationships. Where do I feel most alive? And then I'd probably step back and say, well, how can I spend more time in that corner? Because we're talking about fulfillment. So you sort of have to know where you are on the map so that you can determine where you want to go. I'd ask myself questions like, you know, what am I postponing in my life that really matters? Like, do we all hear ourselves say, like, I'll be happy when? If and when, like that's just, it's part of our vernacular. And I'd probably dump that because that's just not going to serve us here. I'd come to terms with those types of things. And again, I encourage everybody to look at the book because there's a lot of exercises you can apply to answer these questions, but sit quietly, be honest, ask yourself those powerful questions, and then see what insights show up and what surprises you.
Yeah, I like that very much. Shelley, is there something you wanted to add to that, or?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Oh, I was just laughing because I love that Laurie highlighted. I mean, you guys, this book is intended to be, it's part memoir, part manifesto, part interactive guide. And I think the most important part of it is the interactive guide. I take you on my journey with my kind of roller coaster of a story, but the entire intent is so I can put an arm around you and say, I got you as you do some of this same work. So at the end of each section, there are these soul search questions. Laurie just highlighted some of my favorite ones so that you can really do this. So, hey, by the way, this is a great way to use your me-team time. Set aside a couple hours and dive into some of the juicy questions we're about to give you. That's the intent of the book, is to, you know, be a mirror to what's going on in your life and helping you kind of unearth what does it look like for you to live more authentically, courageously, and purposefully. So your life can be on your terms and really light you up every day.
So, and now that we're talking about authenticity, so where do we begin? So,
Yeah, so I am like a walking billboard for the fact that authenticity is the truest form of rebellion. So it kind of goes back to what I was saying early on when I was talking about a rebel soul and this idea of rebelling for. We're all rebels because if we're living our truth and not what society and our parents and everybody else is telling us to be or to do, we're automatically being rebels because we're rebelling for who we are. And that's what authenticity truly is. And the only way we know that is to get still and get quiet and really tap into what is our truth? What is my soul saying? Do I even know it? Because I mean, I'm raising my hand to say the reason why I'm on this journey and the reason why I wrote this book is because I wasn't listening. There were signs left, right, and center. My body was failing me. I was having nightmares. All this crazy stuff was happening. And I was still saying, well, I should be doing, stay on the corporate track. I should keep doing what I'm doing because I've invested 26 years in it. And I wasn't listening. So first step is listening and getting quiet. And here's I think one of the most powerful questions in the book, like, what would change right now in your life if you were being 100% true to you? Really, like, think about that and let it sink in. And the only way we can answer that is if we're really truly connected with our own essence and knowing and truth. And that's what I call the soul.
I'm going to go a little bit off script because somebody asked an interesting question that I think we usually give an excuse for, and saying, how many times do you hear, oh, it's not as simple, it's not that easy, right? To just like focus on myself, like people have families, you have responsibilities. So what do you say to someone that's like, it's not as easy as you make it sound?
It goes back to something Laurie was saying earlier. It's really truly about those tiny steps. We are not advocating for turning your life upside down and inside out. And one of the things that I always say, and it's really important for anybody who's feeling that right now, one, I feel you, because when you're in the messy middle of it all, and I was there, I know this really well, Laurie was there too. It's like you just can't see that step in front of you. So I totally, I feel you and I see you. And our responsibility is to take one tiny step in the direction of what lights me up? What are some baby steps that I can take to even uncover my passions? So here's a great example of something I did. Well, first of all, two things I want to say. One is Soulbbatical is not about leaving your job. It's about finding yourself. And while I took the radical step of walking away from my corporate career, and some of you might make the same decision, that's not the message. The message is aligning our truth, all facets of our lives to these things we're talking about, to our truth, right? And so one of the ways that I started, because I didn't have a clue when I walked away from Harley where this was going to lead me, what journey I was on, that I would be sitting in front of all of you having this conversation today, that I would have written a book published by Simon & Schuster. All I knew is that I said, I'm going to give myself permission, that word again, I'm going to give myself permission to explore my passions and reconnect with what lights me up. And for me, those were travel, tough these days, I totally get it, and photography and writing. And those are things I'd really lost touch with. I was 1000% focused on my work and I forgot about being me. I was so caught up in the doing of my career that I forgot about the being of Shelley Paxton. And so I kind of repositioned, wait a second, I'm a marketer. What if the most iconic brand I could ever represent is Shelley Paxton? Not Harley Davidson or Visa or AOL or all these incredible companies and brands that I've had the honor to work for, but me. And what does that even mean? What does that look like? So I would say, while it doesn't feel easy right now, and the hard thing isn't always the easy thing, we need to remind ourselves, it's really, really powerful to sit and get in touch with yourself as that first step. I hope that makes sense.
It did to me. And I hope that the person that asked the question, it made sense for them too. But thank you for, Laurie, did you want to add anything to that? Or?
No, I was just thinking, like, a lot of the principles that we're talking about here, one might think this requires a lot of courage. You know, I gotta stop doing this and change. And, you know, there's probably a lot going on in our minds. I would say, you know, confidence and courage are terms we talk about a lot with our clients. And just a reminder for the audience that courage is looking at something in the face and taking action, especially if it's action that's going to serve you. And confidence is just an outcome. My point is this: you don't need to have confidence to do any of this work or apply these principles. You just need a little courage, and that it may not be easy, and it is possible. And it's super liberating. It's super liberating. So we've said a couple of times, and it's really true, small steps done frequently drive the change you're looking for your life, and to really take that in.
Thank you. Well, as we're approaching the end of this webinar and all of this enlightenment, I want to ask one last question. Are there any suggestions you'd like to offer our viewers who want to start on their journey to become the CSO, Chief Soul Officer of their life?
Yeah, 100%. I think we've got, well, I mean, the book is chock full of them. So let me just say that. One of my personal favorites is an exercise that we call the Soul Sucks versus the Soul Fuels exercise. And this is something you can literally do at home on your computer, or take a blank, a blank white piece of paper like this and draw a line down the middle of it. And on the left side, entitle the left column Soul Fuels. These are the things that light you up, that give you energy, that you could do all day long and lose track of time, and that frankly you'd probably do for free in the world. And on the right-hand side, entitle that column Soul Sucks. These are the things that drain you, that just rob you of energy, that most likely, to get back to what Laurie was talking about, are the shoulds in our lives, that are just the heavy burden of, well, I'm doing this out of guilt or obligation or people pleasing. I'm not doing this because it is serving me, my values, my and what I'm rebelling for in the world. So once you have that, the exercise is really simple, you guys. The exercise is, give yourself 10 minutes on a clock. Punch 10 minutes in your timer on your phone, pick up a pen, and just start writing. Give yourself 5 minutes on the Soul Fuels column just to see what comes up. Just start writing about things that light you up, things that give you energy, people, places, activities, things. And don't edit yourself, no judgment, no editing. And then do the same thing on the right-hand side. Stream of consciousness, let it flow. And then when that timer goes off, just sit back and look at those lists and process, like, what surprises you about those lists? Is one way longer than the other one? What scares you about those lists? What inspires you? Did something come up that was completely unexpected in either one of them? And then you can start to ask yourself questions about, like, well, okay, if I'm seeing a trend here that I don't love, what can I do to start taking stuff off, maybe dismissing, delegating those 4 Ds, things off of the Soul Sucks list, so you can create more space in your life for the soul fuels and welcome more of those in. It's a super fun exercise, and it surprises me every single time I do it and have a client do it. There is always at least one insight and revelation in doing that work.
I might start it today. Laurie, go ahead.
No, I couldn't. I loved Soul Sucks, Soul Fuel. I use it with my clients all the time. We use it in our Soulbbatical work, and I love the name of it because everyone can relate to it, right? Everyone can relate to it. The only other thing I want to add here, and I know we've got we're just about at time, is the way Shelley's talking about it, and it's the right way, is to set that 10 to 15 minutes aside and just pour yourself out. It's also interesting if you do this exercise and leave it on the corner of your desk and see what happens over the course of a week, and then what surprises you as you're adding to it throughout the week. The point is, it's super powerful and very informative, very informative. So I see, Astrid, I see one question in the chat that sounds like it's common. If I may just quickly address it, and then I know we have time. Amar asks, how many times do you hear "it's not that easy," and what do you say to it?
Sorry, Laurie, that still was a question I asked earlier, but if you want to like add on to that, please feel free to.
Oh, I didn't hear you call. Pardon me. You know, I think honestly everything is easy. I think that we complicate things on our own, and I would ask yourself, you know, what are you telling yourself is true if in fact you're landing with it's not easy? So.
Thank you, Laurie. Sorry if that was confusing. I didn't exactly read it out, and but yes, it was a question from Amar, and thank you for adding on to that. Great. Well, thank you so much. I know that we also want to promote the fact that you have a masterclass in May. So here's all the information here, and I will let Sumit close out.
Wow, masterclass in May sounds great. I have to watch now what words come out of my mouth. Out of this this amazing session. What a beautiful reminder, what a, I would say, soul-packed reminder. Your bumper sticker did strike a chord with us forever, Shelley and Laurie. Self-care isn't selfish. I promise we'll redefine the beautiful boundaries that you so ably brought to us. Few things that I am taking away: soul models versus role models, return on impact versus return on investment. I should, or I get to. This is the most beautiful part of the whole session for me. Being your chief soul officer means turning the volume up internally. What a beautiful way to say it. Today we are brave, rebelling for making a difference in the cause we believe. It's amazing. I mean, there's so many takeaways. Shelley and Laurie, I can't thank you enough. I'm sure after listening to this, we all will celebrate the tiny little steps, changes, or acts of courage, as you rightfully said. I would like to thank you for being the insider mirror for us today. Thank you so much for inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you. It was great to be with you.
Thank you so much. And I cannot wait to start my path to being a CSO.
Join us on the journey.
Thank you, guys.
Join us on the journey. Thank you so much, folks.
Wonderful. Our audience, thank you very much for joining us. Stay tuned for the next episode of our wonderful season, Women in Leadership. Now you know why we changed the name from Women in Technology to Women in Leadership. Do write to us on what would you like us to bring to you next as we write our season 3 stories now. Till then, be your own chief soul officer.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah.
All right.